Hey everyone, Jonathan Blackwood here from Commercial Integrator with another 3 questions interview. Today's guest is Dan Lynch from Symetrix. Dan, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Jonathan.
It's great to have you. We're talking all about distance learning this month, so I want to jump right into it because I know Symetrix has a lot of insight into the topic. So right off the bat, when everyone has easy access to tools like Zoom and YouTube, is distance learning moving away from needing commercial integrators and AV companies to help them set those situations up?
Well, distance learning isn't new, and it's interesting that two of the biggest challenges for distance learning are still the same: access and quality. As early as the 1830s, you could study composition by mail in Sweden. You could learn Pitman shorthand in England in the penny post. You could study languages in Germany by mail. And by the 1890s, you could earn a degree by mail in New York State. And in those cases, access to distance learning was being made available by the relatively new invention of the postal system. That type of distance learning is called asynchronous learning, meaning the teacher and the pupil are not synchronized in time. The teacher creates the educational material, and then at some future time, the pupil receives that material. Now, over 100 years later, the internet, of course, offers plenty of access to asynchronous learning. There are multiple examples where you can access every lecture by every instructor in an entire university online for free. But more importantly, the internet has completely changed synchronous distance learning. Synchronous distance learning is the teacher and the pupil being synchronized in time. They're present together and they're able to have an interactive experience. In today's environment, access has almost stopped being an issue, and the more critical issue is quality, or maybe clarity is a better way to express it. Now, saying that, I'm not talking about just video quality or audio clarity. It's an issue of how clearly ideas can be communicated, how naturally interaction between the instructor and the pupil can happen, and maybe most importantly, how easily that virtual classroom can get out of the way of the education. Anybody can fire up the camera on their laptop and launch a virtual classroom from any one of a dozen different services. And when 3.5 million public school teachers all needed a solution pretty much overnight, that simplicity saved us. The thing is, everybody, especially the teachers, knew all along that wasn't a great solution. Teachers ended up spending huge amounts of time dealing with technical issues, making sure they selected the right audio source or had their camera turned on or were sharing the right screen. They were forced to spend tons of time and effort just maintaining the digital environment rather than being allowed to teach. Because of that, teachers were working 12 or 14-hour days, but only getting a few hours of teaching done. A well-designed and properly configured distance learning environment needs to eliminate all of that nonsense. In a traditional classroom, the teacher walks in, she turns on the lights, pulls out whatever teaching material she's going to use in that class. The students come in and they start interacting. She's teaching, not juggling webcam drivers or adjusting microphone gain. A good distance learning environment needs to be just as easy to use as a traditional classroom. But setting up an environment like that isn't a do-it-yourself project for most people. If the goal is to have a transparent distance learning environment where the teacher and the pupil are able to interact naturally without worrying about anything other than their conversation and that flow of knowledge, making that happen is going to require expertise in audio, video, both camera and capture, integrating pre-recorded materials, distributing materials to the students when you can't just hand them a worksheet, and controlling the entire system so it's as easy as turning on the lights in a traditional classroom. Making all of that happen is the value that a commercial integrator brings. And there's no technology that's ever going to replace that expertise or eliminate the need for it.
Yeah, and to that point, we're hearing a lot lately about blended distance learning environments as well. What additional challenges have to be considered for an environment like that?
Blended distance learning means that some of the students are physically present in the room with the teacher and some students are remote. We're seeing a lot of cases, for example, where a classroom is only allowed to have 10 students in it at a time, but there are 20 students in the class. And there's lots of ways to accommodate that. It could be something as simple as, half the students are remote this week, the other half are remote next week, and they just alternate throughout the semester. This is really popular because being able to interact with your classmates has a huge positive effect on learning, not to mention the basic human need for socialization. However, successful distance learning in a blended environment it's an order of magnitude more difficult. For example, a teacher in a purely distance learning environment can use a headset. If a teacher is using a headset, his microphone is naturally in an appropriate location. He's able to hear what the students are saying without being bothered by noises in the environment. And there's no need to worry about acoustic echo. As soon as you have multiple people all sharing a physical space who need to be able to hear and be heard, all of those benefits are lost. If a student in the local room asks a question, all the students need to be able to hear that question, regardless of where they're located. That means a microphone system that can clearly pick up people located in different places around the room, a speaker system that allows everybody in the room to hear the remote students, and a way to deal with acoustic echo. And once all that's solved, you've barely gotten started, because you still need to deal with the visual aspect of learning and interaction. Ideally, every student should be able to see not just the teacher, but also all of the other students. If the remote students are each a little 2-inch square image on the teacher's laptop, there's not going to be any meaningful interaction between the students. And it's very difficult for the teacher to simultaneously interact with the students in the room and the remote students on the laptop. So a blended distance learning environment needs a way for the students in the room to see their remote classmates and vice versa. And that webcam built into the lid of the teacher's laptop isn't going to do a very good job of that. So a blended distance learning environment requires all the same solutions that our industry has been using for years in conference rooms. If even a small high school with, let's say, 600 students is going to do blended distance learning, and they want to do it effectively, they need 30 teleconference rooms. That's not something that a school's IT department is going to be able to set up. Designing a system like that, installing the equipment, and implementing a control solution that allows the room to work without needing a full-time technician for each room, that can only be accomplished by working with an AV integrator who has the expertise and the skill set to solve all those problems.
Yeah, that's a ton of perspective into distance learning environments. And I know Symetrix has been involved in distance learning projects as well. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
It's always fun when you have a product and you know what it's capable of and you're pretty sure you know how it's going to be used. And then integrators take that product and they do completely amazing things with it that you never expected. The Symetrix Radius NX is a great example of that. The Radius NX, it's an open architecture DSP, which means you can program it to do pretty much anything. It has USB connectivity, so you can connect it directly to a computer or laptop and integrate the computer into this audio system. That's how you connect Zoom or Microsoft Teams, that sort of thing. It has acoustic echo cancellation, which means you can use mics and speakers and not have to worry about the speakers getting echoed back to the far end. Of course, it works with the Symetrix W-Series remotes that have the buttons, the volume controls, or it works with our touch panels for more customized control. And it has a USB host port that allows you to record audio from the system to a thumb drive or play back from a thumb drive to the system. So that's the description, right? That seems like, okay, I know what that does. On one end of the spectrum, an integrator used Radius NX DSPs in a high school to set up a blended distance learning classroom system, pretty much exactly the way we discussed earlier, with one Radius in each classroom. But the Radius NX is a Dante-enabled DSP. So it's capable of sending and receiving up to 64 channels of Dante digital audio across the local network. And Symetrix DSPs have the ability to directly control third-party devices like video encoders and decoders, that sort of thing. The integrator used those features to allow any classroom in that school to not just connect the local and the remote students together for that classroom, but also allow the classrooms to interact with each other. So the physics teacher in her classroom on the first floor goes to her touch panel and she hits the button for the computer science classroom on the second floor on the other end of the building. The teacher in that computer science classroom sees an orange icon in his touch panel. He taps the button, and those two rooms are instantly linked together like one big classroom. Now you have the physics students and the computer science students collaborating together on a project without ever leaving their own classrooms, and half of them are at home while it's happening. And then on the entirely other end of the spectrum of how you might use a product, a college music department had a problem with how they were going to be able to do lessons for WIN students when you're not supposed to have a teacher and a student in the same room without face masks. It's tough to play a trumpet with a mask on. And one of their primary concerns was super high quality audio, which is what led them to the Radius NX. And they were able to put a microphone and a speaker in some of their small practice rooms and also in some of the instructors' offices, and then link each instructor's office to one practice room through the Radius NX with acoustic echo cancellation. That means the instructor can be in their office while the student is in the practice room, and they could have lessons just like normal. And the best part for them was the fact that the Radius NX is so powerful, they were able to use a single Radius NX to link 6 practice rooms to 6 different instructors' offices. So that was a really simple, cost-effective solution to what seemed like a major problem. So distance learning can mean a lot of different things to different people. And we're really proud of the fact that Symetrix products like the Radius NX allow integrators to really easily provide great solutions.
Yeah, a ton of great use cases, and it's so good to hear about, how these products are actually being used in real time in real life scenarios. I'm sure Symetrix has a bunch of other examples like that. If anyone in our audience wants to learn more about Symetrix, what you guys provide and what you can do for integrators and their customers, how can they reach out or how can they find out more about the company?
The starting point for everything, whether you're looking for product information or trying to contact one of us, is www.symetrix.co. That's symetrix.co. You'll find links to all of us, all of our social media, all of our case studies. It's everything you might need at symetrix.co.
Well, I encourage everyone in the audience to go to the website, find out more about the company. As Dan has outlined, they're doing a lot of stuff specifically in the distance learning environments, but all over different markets as well. So Dan Lynch of Symetrix, thank you so much for joining us for 3 questions today.
Thanks a lot, Jonathan.